Today I will walk you through the latest drama in the WordPress community when Matt Mullenweg, the co-founder of WordPress, openly criticized WP Engine, literally calling them like nobody should go and renew with them on WordCamp US 2024. So what's happened and what is all this fuss about? Let's take a look at it. Also, just before we start, this is only what I gathered online, what are feelings of people online. I will leave all the resources down in the description so you can go and make your own research, your own decision, which is also very, very important. So let's continue. Firstly, Matt is definitely co-founder of WordPress. He's also currently CEO of this company called Automatic, which is going to be relevant later on. But we also need to look at another stuff. He is one of the most influential figures in WordPress community. So his words definitely have a lot of weight. So what did he actually say? Well, during one of the keynote speaks, Matt displayed the fact that WP Engine is not contributing enough to the open source platform overall. They are supposedly having revenue of around $450 million, yet they are contributing only 40 hours per week into open source of WordPress. So basically they are not trying to develop it, but only take advantage of it, which he thinks is not really that well. And there's also a specific page on WordPress.org that displays how many hours are being pledged by which company. You can see Matt's Automatic is 100% leading this pledge. They have nearly 4,000 hours per week. And you can see also another companies in here, for example, the ones that have a lot of plugins, but also another web hosting services, Hostinger, Bluehost, and others. And if we scroll really down on the first page, we can see WP Engine. There are also very similar web hosting companies, for example, SiteGround, that pledges only 42 hours as well. So why did they start picking up on WP Engine is not very clear. Now, to be fair to Matt, he wasn't criticizing people actually working in WP Engine not wanting to go and contribute, but he was mostly criticizing this company called Silver Lake, which is a private equity company, and they acquired WP Engine in 2018. So it's not anything recent. Like, this is not they just turned up today and said, well, we're not going to contribute and high up our prices to maximize the profits for us. It's obviously that this private equity will try to go and make as much money as possible. But to be also honest to them, they own or partially own a lot of big companies. For example, Plate, SoFi, Stripe, Unity, Waymo, and a lot more. What was also interesting during the keynote that they specifically show the image of this person, Lee Whitlinger. Now, I don't know what they were actually saying because the audio was muted. I don't know if it was because they reposted this online, so they wanted to go and not talk about this because it was covering a specific person, but it was definitely weird. He is actually a managing director of Silver Lake, and in the past, he was also working for GoDaddy. Now, what is very interesting is that this was also mentioned by Matt as one of the downfalls of WordPress, why it wasn't picking up that much, why it was actually losing some customers because companies like WP Engine do not contribute enough. Once again, to be fair to him, he did mention that this can be only one of the causes, and he didn't want to go and fully say it's only because of this. But at the same time, there were a lot of weird stuff. It was actually relatively normal keynote speak from the beginning. They were talking about the open sourceness, describing it, how it should work, giving some examples, for example, Meta, how they're a little bit steering with their open source platform, and talking about the four core elements of learning, evolving, teaching, nurturing, and then also describing WordPress 5 for the Future initiative and all the stuff. But then it turned into direct criticism of WP Engine. Once again, they didn't only call them out, they literally said, like, if it comes to renewal, you should basically not do it, like reconsider it, don't go with them. And people start calling him out as well and his company when he is CEO of the Automatic, because they own platforms like Pressable and WP Cloud, which are direct competitors of WP Engine. So this is really like people start to think like, is there some conflict on interest as of now? A big part also was given to the brand confusion of WP Engine. Since they're using the WP in their name, many people can think they're directly in some link to WordPress itself. But people don't really find this that relevant, coming it from Matt, who is CEO of Automatic, which is the company behind WordPress.com. They own WordPress.com, which is probably the most confusing for complete beginners, the difference between WordPress.org and WordPress.com. So I don't think this reasoning in here is very valid. But the open sourceness of WordPress on its own, you can actually go and use it. I don't think it's that confusing. I tried to do some tests. I went online in incognito mode and tried to put WordPress hosting to see if WP Engine would have some advantage coming it first. People in their questions were also asking them directly, like if it is relevant. For example, .com top level domains can have advantage is search engine results, but this was kind of meh discussion, so we don't need to talk about it. Then there was also weird talks about sponsorship dynamic, because in this event, WP Engine actually sponsored 75,000. I think a lot of it should go to like a big after party for people to go and enjoy, which was a very like weird atmosphere for a lot of attendees from what I've heard online. They really didn't know how to feel. This was supposed to be like a very welcoming event, talking about the unity and elevating everybody. And this just brought down the energy a lot, especially like some juniors were supposedly very like weirded out, like what's going on. So this was definitely something kind of weird. And what people also didn't like is that when he's talking about WP Engine specifically now, why did he, like 1 year ago, talk on their event? He was part of it, a very big part of it actually. So wasn't it a problem back in the day? Because it seems very rushed, this type of thing in here. Then people started to questioning some stuff. In there was an event when they can go and ask them some people. There was a very interesting also debate behind the block editor, how it is really good or not, and if that can go and contribute to the downfall of WordPress in that same time period, which I think wasn't talked about that much, but definitely something that's people should be considering. And then one of the big criticisms of WP Engine also was their declining service and support, which is definitely subjective. I have to admit, I don't really feel any difference in there. I think they are still one of the best in what they are doing. They have a very, very weird pricing, but one of the biggest criticism points for WP Engine was that they are disabling WordPress revisions and they're not allowing it. So their point is that, hey, like you are not giving people the full WordPress open source experience because you are gatekeeping some content. But some people started to take WP Engine side, basically calling out Automatic that, hey, you own WordPress.com and your company doesn't allow users on the lower tiers to even download WordPress plugins, which is completely essential to the whole WordPress experience. But they are not allowing. They need to go and upgrade to more expensive plan for this. So they were basically saying that Matt and Automatic as a company don't really have moral high ground to go and say something like this. This was mostly in the debates after, so it wasn't discussed at the event that much. So this is very, very brief overview of what's going on. Matt basically called out WP Engine. People were confused. Why now? Why specifically them? There are so many more companies as well. For example, like Bluehost, Newfold Digital. They have been very bad for a very long time. And it's also owned by this company, Endurance International Group, which had to change their name because they were so bad. So why calling WP Engine when we have also another companies that, yes, maybe contributed more in terms of hours, but they have way worse services providing to people via their web hosting. For example, Bluehost. I don't think there is discussion even to be made that for normal website, WP Engine is better than Bluehost, for example. So really calling out one specific person is probably not the best idea, especially on event like this. So is this problem of WP Engine specifically? I don't think so. It is a very big company owned by private equity that covers $110 billion, which is massive. And WP Engine is just a very small part of it probably. They have revenue of allegedly $450 million. So they definitely have time to go and contribute and pledge more hours toward WordPress. because it is definitely one of the main driving source of their income, this open source platform. But at the same time, it has been said multiple times how hard it is to actually go and contribute it towards this. The approving process can be very tedious, but also some people started to go and share their own experiences. For example, an incident when developer's patch was ignored only to be approved later when it was submitted by someone from Automatic's team. So you can see how this could be discouraging for a lot of people. And yes, you can go and pledge multiple hours, but if it's never gonna be approved, is there a little point? Well, that's definitely talk. So there should be more discussion. We are also expecting some news coming from WP Engine, some reactions to this story, because this happened around Friday and now it's weekend. So we would definitely want to go and see what's gonna happen next. So definitely subscribe if you want to see more news like this around the WordPress. And this is everything. Have a nice day and goodbye.